Thank you all for coming, and may I also thank the Foreign Policy Association for having me. It's a real honor to address you all this evening. The theme of my talk, and it is a talk, not a lecture, and I encourage audience feedback and interaction. If anyone feels possessed to shout out their favorite aphorism, then I encourage you to do so at any time during the next hour or so. The theme is Aphorisms and Diplomacy, and I will get to that theme in a minute. But because aphorisms are not only the world's oldest form of literature, they are also the world's most intimate and personal form of literature, I would first like to say a little bit about how I discovered aphorisms, why I love aphorisms, why I'm obsessed by aphorisms, and that will segue neatly into how aphorisms are used and abused in the context of diplomacy. I first discovered aphorisms when I was 8 years old, and in the most unlikely of places, the Reader's Digest magazine. Now, does anyone ever heard of the Reader's Digest magazine? So you all will know the famous quotable quotes page in Reader's Digest. And it is still there, and it is still filled with quotable quotes by quotable folks like Oprah Winfrey, various Hollywood celebrities, and occasionally even statesmen and diplomats and politicians. And when I was 8 years old, I found a back issue of Reader's Digest magazine lying on the bathroom floor, slightly damp and mildewy, and I picked it up and I turned by chance to the quotable quotes page. And from that moment on, I was hooked. There was something about aphorisms that just completely knocked my socks off. What I loved about them was the intensity of language, the way that the authors played with words and manipulated words and crafted words, and how such a wealth of meaning and a wealth of possibilities was crammed into such a tiny, tiny space. I thought it was just incredible. Another thing that really turned me on about aphorisms is that they're very, very funny. A lot of them are, in any case. And Dr. Phil McGraw, has anyone ever heard of Dr. Phil McGraw? He's in Reader's Digest a lot. And one of his stuck in my mind, I just read it recently. If you marry for money, you will earn every penny. Unfortunately, that does not apply to me, but it's a good example of the humor, the way that aphorisms mix humor with wisdom. So, my love affair with aphorisms started when I was about 8. And then when I was a teenager, about 12, 13, I developed an urge to collect them. Now, if you want to collect aphorisms, you have two choices. You either have to be blessed with an impeccable memory, or you have to make some kind of record of the aphorisms. And I have not been blessed with an impeccable memory. So I had, as many teenagers do, my room was plastered with posters of rock stars. And what I did was, I took David Bowie, turned his face to the wall, and I started writing the aphorisms on the back. After David Bowie came George Harrison. After George Harrison, Pink Floyd. Soon I had a whole room filled with aphorism wallpaper. And the aphorisms that I've collected, and from that moment on I've been collecting aphorisms till this day and this book, they've become a sort of like a photographic album, a sort of collection of intellectual snapshots. And when I reread an aphorism that I first encountered earlier in my life, it brings back all the memories and associations I had with that particular saying when I first read it. For example, when I was 16, I started learning to play the violin, and at that time came across the saying by Samuel Butler, "Life is like playing a violin solo in public and learning the instrument as one goes along." That applies to a lot of situations I've found in life. Another one that I remember from my teenage years was by Abraham Lincoln, and that is, "I have been often forced to my knees by the overwhelming conviction that there was no place else to go." So, now, I've I've been dealing with the aphorism addiction pretty successfully, and I maintain a kind of semblance of normal life. But it is a fact that once you're kind of clued into aphorisms, you begin to see them absolutely everywhere. And that's certainly true for me. And this is another wonderful thing about aphorisms, is that unfortunately, when I'm at a dinner party, someone asks me what I do for a living, I have to say I write books about aphorisms. And many people say, what's an aphorism? And it's a kind of strange word, and it's not a very familiar word to many people. But as soon as you explain what an aphorism is, they immediately come with their favorite aphorism. Everybody has a favorite aphorism. It's the refrain to a popular song. It's something that their grandmother said. It's something that their father always said. It's something they read in a greeting card. Wherever you look, ladies and gentlemen, when you walk out this door in 45 minutes, you will find aphorisms. Just a few examples from my recent daily life. I was in the train recently, and a teenager was walking down the corridor of the train, and he had long hair and a couple studs in various painful places. He looked like a real party animal. And he had a T-shirt on, and the saying on the shirt was, a weekend wasted is not a wasted weekend. Now, I hasten to add that that's not necessarily a sentiment that I endorse in any way, but it is a very, very good aphorism. I recently got an email from someone who heard me interviewed on the radio, and she said, my boss just said this, and I have to know if it's an aphorism. And so she wrote it, and it is, the saying was, I thought it over until I overthought it. And I wrote back and I said, yes, that is an aphorism, and your boss should be in my book. That's a great encapsulation of what happens when you think too long about something, and you then become unable to act on it. Another one, someone that I just met casually, and we got to talking about aphorisms, and she mentioned this one. She couldn't remember who had told it to her, but she said it was her favorite saying, words to live by. And it goes, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. So these are the kinds of sayings that are all around you. And these are the kinds of sayings that, whether you consciously know it or not, you are living your life by. For example, my father was very fond of saying, little said, easily mended. And that's one way to handle problems and situations in your life. And it's something that's certainly that he applied in his life, but it's something that stuck in my mind, but not necessarily as a model to always follow. So, now, before I get to the aphorisms and diplomacy part, I am going to try and show you what an aphorism is. Now, this involves juggling, I'm afraid. And see, the thing about aphorisms is they're the shortest literary form on the planet, but I've found it impossible to come up with a very short definition of what an aphorism is. So, instead of that, I came up with Geary's 5 laws of the aphorism. And these are the 5 laws that a saying must obey to be considered an aphorism. Now, the observant among you will notice that I am holding 3 balls, not 5. That is because it is very, very hard to juggle 5 balls. And I can't do it. So you're going to have to willingly suspend your disbelief and imagine that I'm really juggling 5. Excuse me, but I have to take off my jacket for this. Usually the people in the front row are not seriously harmed during this segment of the show, but I mean, just if you're insured, I think everything will be fine. Take a little sip of water. Okay. The first law of the aphorism is it must be brief. Why? Because only a fool gives a speech in a burning house. It's okay, you can laugh. It won't distract me. The second law is it must be definitive. There's no ifs, ands. Don't laugh that hard, because that does distract me. No, just kidding. The second law is must be definitive. No ifs, ands, or buts. Aphorists tell it like it is.